And we're going to go ahead and get started.
We were just talking about that before the meeting.
Going to go ahead and call to order. I'll take roll. Mayor Pro Tem Martinez.
Here.
Pro Tem. What? Council Member Laura. I don't see him. Was he on the committee?
No, here last time. But he's on the committee now.
Oh, okay.
But he's not here right now.
Gotcha.
Is he taking Mr. White's?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. City Manager Todd Parton. There he is. Haven't seen him in a while. Just in general, not, the committee. Kyle Wersinski. There he is. Bernie Balland.
Here.
Bertha Barraza.
Right here.
Terrence Davis, present. Randy Harris.
Here.
Jennifer Higgins.
Here.
Mike McGraw. Not seeing him. Absent at this time. Rob Moran is here. And I did receive an email from Dylan O'Dell, our student representative, who was expected to be here, and something came up at home, so he is at home. But I'm glad he emailed me. And then we still have two vacancies, right, for two business community members.
Correct. And I apologize, there was some mistake on the actual agenda. So I did add Dylan's name to the agenda, but that didn't make it onto the one that was actually posted. So The next meeting, I'll make sure to have his name versus vacancy on that position.
Okay. So if we can at this time stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and Mr. Todd Parton, if you can lead us in that, that'd be great.
Can you join me in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any adjustments or anything changed to the agenda that we need to be aware of?
No.
No? Okay. Is there anything on the agenda for this evening that is a conflict of interest with anyone that we need to disclose? Looks like no. Okay. So we're going to start with item number 1, public comment. Is there anyone here to provide public comment to the committee? Seeing none? Okay, so no, we do not have any public comment. Item number 2, which are action items. 2A is the approval of the minutes from the December 13th, 2017 meeting. Any questions, revisions, concerns on that? Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes.
Ms. Higgins and Moran, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. Motion passes. Item 2B, update of the projects from city staff. Ms. Warsinski.
Thank you, Committee Chair. So, not many significant updates to speak of in addition to the ones we talked about last time. So hopefully everyone had a chance to dive into our website for the general plan between the last meeting after we had that update. And we are progressing on the Potrero interchange. So that contract was awarded. So we have our construction management as well as the actual construction contract awarded for the Potrero interchange. We should be proceeding with a groundbreaking ceremony within the next month or so. And more information will be available on our website on the particulars, days, and times on those types of things. So we're gearing up for that, so we're excited about that. Obviously, we're still in the process of the large wastewater treatment plant expansion and the desalter. So we're still on track with the regional board's requirements and deadlines. So we're progressing on that to basically move forward and construct those facilities by 2020. And then other notable projects, hopefully I'm saying this with my fingers crossed, the commercial center that we've been talking about for months now will start grading this month. They're getting together their final pieces of the puzzle in terms of tribal clearances and so forth. And they'll hopefully be moving dirt in the near future. You've seen the other significant project that's moving dirt which is RSI Communities, and that's the 981 houses north of State Route 60, over there by the Potrero Bridge. So they have asked, and they're going to be starting on models soon. So my guess they'll have groundbreaking on models within the next month or so. And it'll take them a little bit to get those open, and as soon as they get those open, they'll probably start sales and production of each of those units out there.
What's the name of that project?
It's now called Olive Wood. So Heartland has changed names into Olive Wood. So use either of those names with me, I'll let you know which one, that it's the same thing. But I think their marketing name for the entire area and how their sign program is going to work is going to be Olive Wood. And the other project out there that's grading is obviously Hidden Canyon Industrial, and they're just simply moving dirt around to balance the site for the two large industrial buildings that have been approved, but we don't have tenants or we don't have discussions going on with any prospective tenant out there. And then another thing of note is we did get not we, but the business that was looking at Beaumont did gain their approval at the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District meeting for their water will serve letter and water agreement. And that's that Korean company that makes Korean foods, prepackaged foods and sauces, and they shall be occupying one of the large buildings that's currently out there built on 4th Street, and their name is CJ Foods. So you can look up their information. They're an offshoot of Samsung, headquartered in Korea. And this will be one of their many production and distribution facilities within the United States, a couple of which will be in California. So we're excited about that. Initial hiring will be anywhere between 250 to 300 employees at that location. So the city's very excited about that moving forward, and we have a series of meetings with staff and their architects and consultants and the utilities to make sure that everything gets in order by their intended start date, which would be summer of this year. So that's exciting. A couple other things we're working on, but nothing of real note that I wouldn't be hesitant to jinx if I told you.
Now with that property, the industrial property, how far south does it go, and does it go all the way, the constructability of the land, all the way to the east where Wolverine area is?
The one they're currently grading?
Yes.
South, I don't know if this thing has internet on it. Let's check. If it doesn't,
Because it looks like it's kind of
Currently, about
hidden.
a quarter mile as of today. I don't know how far they're going to go back south, east, to where the cell tower is, just beyond,
Okay.
just east of the cell tower. I drove my truck back there.
Oh, all right.
Had to pull them out.
Got the drone, took some pictures, of the Heartland, Olive Wood and all that, so we got,
so if we zoom in on this map, I'm glad I had internet or else that would have looked really bad.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
Nice.
right here is the exit for Jackrabbit Trail.
Okay.
You familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
So really the project is about, well, that didn't work. I was trying to click and do my thing on it. Basically goes from here down to about there,
Mm-hmm.
and then all the way over to around here,
Yeah.
and then back straight up.
Yep.
So you can see the hillsides they'll be using to fill the low areas and create large super pads
Wow.
out there. So it doesn't go all the way over here, which is where Wolverine's building is.
Right.
So there's a disconnect and open area that's actually currently in the county of Riverside between the two sites. But 4th Street will be extended from here all the way out through that project.
So the land going south, that starts to go downhill, or is it still, I know it's hilly, but just, is that all city of Beaumont? And, I'm just looking at the far
A lot
future.
of it was Riverside County, I think,
county.
but some of it was annexed in.
I see. Wow.
Now, Kyle, when is the 4th Street supposed to go through? Timing?
Yeah, that's the existing part, yeah.
It depends who builds 4th Street.
Scary.
So if this development builds it, they'll be given fee credits on the extension that was beyond their borders. If they don't do it, either another developer will have to foot the bill, and then they'll be given fee credits in addition to what their frontage is, or the city may do it, and then if the city does it, each of the developers pays into an impact fee account, which then reimburses us for the cost to build the street. So it's up in the air on who's gonna actually construct it.
The EIR for this one anticipates the Fourth Street extension over, plus access to the Potrero extension on the south side.
So it'll need to be built before the building can be occupied. But if someone else
You have to have
extends
the
it
infrastructure.
before then, that was the difference I
So
was talking
probably
about.
before the end of the year, I'm sure will be started anyway, huh?
Maybe. It all depends on if they have an occupant for the building and how fast they need to build the building and the street, or if they're just out there mass grading and they're going to sell the property off once it's ready to someone actually develop it. So if any of you want to build a 1.8 square foot warehouse, I know who has one for sale.
Put that in my back pocket.
Right.
Okay, any other questions for Kyle on updates from the city?
Are they expecting to expand the road, 60 freeway?
60 freeway, I don't have any current plans on expansion. I do know that RCTC has contemplated truck climbing lanes through the Badlands. I don't know what the timing is on that project. It will require a massive effort to
You'd have to blast, you'd have to.
allow for additional lanes.
Yeah,
Because as you know, the 4 lanes that are out there right now kind of drop off.
right.
So there'll be mass grading to allow for the additional 2 lanes. You have any idea of?
I have not.
I got nothing.
Anything new either.
Yeah. So I know they've talked about it,
Definitely
but
not about widening over here.
yeah, definitely not widening through this area either. What we're doing is looking at the interchange on my cursor here. And that's the one I'm talking about, that will end up building the street across and then ultimately designing and building the ramps associated with that interchange.
And eventually on phase 2, they're gonna build the extra lanes for the overpass on Potrero.
The ramps?
Yeah, right now it's gonna stay 2 lanes, but in the phase 2, you said that they were gonna build an extra lane.
I think the initial phase has the full width on the bridge.
Oh,
It just doesn't have the ramps.
okay.
So part of what we're looking at right now is designing. So phase 1 and 1A are designed, and those have been out to bid. So it's about a $14 million construction bid to build the bridge and the ancillary improvements either side. Phase 2 is actually building the ramps. Phase 1's gonna work, is anticipating some of the adjustments to Western Knoll. There's 2 entryways coming out from the north side of 60 on Western Knoll. The center one's gonna be closed, and the furthest, I think that's the furthest one to the east, is gonna remain open. There's some improvements to Western Knoll, but that's a temporary solution. And again, we plan to be out to design on phase 2 later this calendar year for phase 2, which would be the ramps. It is a TUMF project and is eligible for TUMF funding, is also subject to TUMF fees,
Yeah.
which we're in that program now, so we have a responsibility to provide those TUMF allocations back to WRCOG.
The only other update I have, I got today from CalEd, and there was a legislative alert that the governor's budget does protect some of the very few economic development tools the state of California does have. So there was worry from people like myself and Rob that they were going to go ahead and cut certain economic development things out of the governor's office within this annual budget. So it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Anything can change. It hasn't been approved yet, right?
No, it
Budget?
came out, you proposed it today, and there's
Yeah.
actually an increase, I think, of $20 million for
Mhm.
small business assistance. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. I would imagine those funds would go to small business development centers throughout the state of California and perhaps specialized grants of some sort. Not exactly sure what they have planned for it, but it just debuted today. I will actually be in Sacramento tomorrow with CalEd and the treasurer's office. They're doing some things up there, so maybe I'll hear more.
That's all I have.
Just one thing, to put on the legislative side, SB one, there's an effort to repeal SB one, which is providing, it's the gas tax that was added this last session. That program for Beaumont is projected to generate 10 million over the next 10 years in dollars that can go towards local road maintenance and upgrade. There's other elements of SB one, which are larger dollar grants that can go towards interchange improvements and other major transportation related projects, of which we're staying tuned to those, and as we're ready, we want to be able to be ready to pursue those as they become available. And there's been initial calls for projects that are out there, so we're looking at designing the grade separations that we need for California up the rail line. That is an important artery for us from an economic development perspective. We're designing the Pennsylvania improvements, including a grade separation. But we're looking at the Oak Valley design. We're looking at, we're participating with the Cherry Valley Boulevard interchange as well. But part of the issue of having those designed now is that they're pretty much shovel ready. So that we get Caltrans authorizations, the design's done. There may be some refreshing on environmental if we go too far out. But the whole purpose of that is have those ready. But if SB1 is repealed, that's going to have a massive effect on not only annualized maintenance plans, but also longer range funding for some of these other transportation projects. So I just encourage, if you're tracking that or watching that, it's just something to think about.
If you're talking to your friends and they're mad about the increase in gas tax or their price at the pump, remind them that it's going to be paying for large infrastructure projects and small rehab projects on a local and regional level. So it may seem annoying that the price went up, but at least we know, at least locally, what those dollars will be spent on.
Are some of those dollars going to be spent in our area? You said small local projects.
Well, we have an allocation coming to us. We've submitted a capital plan as we're required to by state law under the program. And we have to provide annual reporting back to the SCO that shows them how we progressed and how we're moving on those identified projects. So there's a local allocation that comes automatically. The additional are some additional pots of monies that have been created through that program that can go to various other transportation related needs. And so those pots are what we want to pursue in addition to the dollars that we have coming. So right now we have an automatic allocation of funds coming to us. I think it's around 250 here this year alone, and it'll grow exponentially as this program kicks in. But anyway, it's a critical issue for us at a critical time. So if it goes away, there's nothing to replace it at this point.
I saw that special called meeting for tomorrow for Potrero.
Yes.
Is that going to be in here or?
One of these rooms.
Okay. What do you guys expect for attendance?
Not sure.
Yeah.
No, it's hard to gauge interest on projects when you have community meetings before they break ground. We hope for large amount of attendance so we can get the word out and answer questions and alleviate concerns beforehand. But, a lot of times we see that after we break ground, then there's concerns afterwards. So we hope.
The second one we've had, right? The first one we had, I don't know if we had anybody. I think it concluded pretty quickly.
Yeah. So we'll play it by ear. If you know anyone that's interested, tell them to come on out and they can get their questions answered. But we'll have information on our website as the project progresses, and obviously they can call us and get questions answered as well.
All right. Okay. Let's move on to item 2D, discussion of the Economic Development Committee goals.
Chairman, I am going to go back to 2C
Okay.
since Jeff Davis
I'm
is
sorry,
here.
I apologize. Yeah.
That's
So
probably
I
the
was-
only
I
reason
was
he
moving
is
so
here.
fast. I was moving fast.
I guess he's probably not gonna just attend for fun, so he,
That's
he
my
did show
error.
up because we've asked him to be here and provide an update on that one.
2C, San Gorgonio Pass Water Agency update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thanks for inviting me to be here. I know we had some fits and starts in getting me here, so it's a pleasure to finally have a chance to address you here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do, and some generic comments about our water supply situation. And then I'm very happy to answer whatever specific questions that you have. The San Gorgonio Pass Water Agency is really a kind of a unique public agency. We are a public agency, just as the city is. We're a California special district. We have no land use planning abilities whatsoever, so we do not issue any building permits. We never have, we never will. We also, not being a retail water agency, do not issue will serve letters as well. So we have no say whatsoever if new homes or businesses get built. We have no say whatsoever. And that say goes to the city council here, or the county, and the local retail water district. What we are expected to do, though, is to provide water supply on a wholesale level for the new growth that does occur. We were created by an act of the state legislature back in the 1960s with the very specific intent of ensuring that the local groundwater basins in this area do not go dry. Because if the local groundwater basins go dry, this becomes a dust bowl, plain and simple. Our job is to not allow that to happen. So there is a local water supply that's here, homegrown, through local groundwater basins, and that is not nearly enough to supply all the water demands of this area. So we were created in the 1960s, and what we do is we purchase water through the State Water Project, comes out of Lake Oroville and through the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, and bring it into our region, sell it to retail water agencies such as the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District. The Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District then takes that and puts it back into the ground to make up for water that they're pulling out of the ground through their wells. Okay, so without the water that they import from us, again, the local groundwater basins would be really, really dropping. We do a report every year on the state of the local groundwater basins. We've just finished the one for 2016. We're always about a year behind because it takes a long time to get the data completed. But 2016 was a year in which we just barely had a little bit more groundwater going into the groundwater basins than was pumped out. 2017 will be much better because 2017 was a very, very wet year. We imported a lot of water in 2017. So that's who we are and what we do. So we recognized, even though we're not a part of the development process, we recognize that the area is growing. The area wants to grow. Developers are lining up to build houses, warehouses, businesses, so on. So we have been in the process for a number of years of negotiating to procure additional water supplies beyond those that we get from the State Water Project. We contracted back in the 1960s for an amount, I'll give you a number, it's not going to mean anything to you, 17,300 acre feet of water per year. An acre foot is about a third of a million gallons, so 1 acre foot would be about a third, three acre feet would be about a million gallons. 1 acre foot is about the amount that 2 to 3 families can live on for a year. Right now it's probably about 2. Quite honestly, per capita water use in California is dropping because of the new development and new landscaping and so on. So in the future it'll be really enough for 3 families. So 17,300 acre feet of water is what we contracted for. That's what we pay for. There's a line item on all your property taxes for the San Gorgonio Pass Water Agency, and that money that we collect through your property tax goes to pay the debt service on the State Water Project, which was started building in the 1960s, and we're still building on it today. So the taxpayers, paid for capacity for 17,300 acre feet of water. We don't get nearly that much. The primary reason we don't get that much is 2 laws, one federal and one state. The federal law is the Federal Endangered Species Act, and the state is the California Endangered Species Act. The Federal Endangered Species Act, the California Endangered Species Act, essentially are designed to protect species that are endangered or threatened or could be endangered or threatened. In this particular case, we're talking about fish, okay? So because of those 2 laws and the implementation of those 2 laws by the federal government and the state government, we don't get anywhere near that 17,300 acre feet that our taxpayers are paying for. The annual average that we get is about 60% of that, which is about 11,000 acre feet, okay? Now, in 2017 was a very wet year. We got 85%. But the previous 5 years, we've been in a drought. And so we got, in 2 years, 2014 and 2015, one of those was a 5% year and one was a 20% year. So in those 2 years, instead of getting 100% times 2, we got 25% of our water that we contracted for, and that our taxpayers pay for. So a lot of that has to do with the fish. Some of it has to do with the hydrology, just a drought. But a lot of it has to do with these laws that just take water away from people and give the water to the fish, with the intent of the fish becoming healthier. And what we're finding is that's not really the case. And I could talk about that for a long time, but that really has nothing to do with what we're about today. Fact of the matter is we get, on the average, about 11,000 acre feet per year. We know that's not enough. So we've been engaged for a number of years in negotiating to obtain additional water supplies. We've been in negotiations on a number of deals that have eventually fallen through for one reason or another. Last year, we did consummate a deal to get an additional 1,700 acre feet of water per year of 100% reliable water. In the water business, that's the gold standard. When I was growing up, we would have said that's the Cadillac of water supply, but nobody thinks the Cadillac is the highest end car anymore. It's the Lexus or the Mercedes or something. I'm just going to call it the gold standard. Because our water is 60%. If we were to obtain additional water supplies from our sources, let's say we get 1,000 acre feet, we're really only getting 600. So you're paying for 1,000, getting 600. But this is a different water supply that's south of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. So it's 100% reliable. Okay, 1,700 acre feet. So that's an additional 10% of our 17,300. Or if you took our 60%, it's 10% of 60%. So it's about 17% of our average water supply. So we've increased our average water supplies by about 17%, which is a hefty amount. 1,700 acre feet of water per year. It's a 20-year deal, so we get that 100% reliable 1,700 acre feet for 20 years. That's about now, it's about 3,500 homes per year. And again, I think over time it will be closer to 4,500 or 5,000 homes per year as the per capita water use goes down. So we obtained that water supply. What we haven't done yet is figure out how we're going to pay for it. We've actually made our first payment on that. And we're not allowed to pay for that with our tax rate, because that's only, by law, we can only use that for water from the State Water Project. This is not water from the State Water Project. So we have to find some other way to pay for it. We will either pay for it through raising our water rates, which is, you don't see that directly as the end user. What we would do is we would raise our rate that the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District pays to us, which means they have to increase what they pay to us, which means they may or may not turn around and raise their water rates to pay for that. I mean, that would be up to them, obviously. So the other way of paying for that would be to say, well, this is water for new development, and so we would have development pay for it. And that was my board's intent when we made that deal. In fact, as we negotiated that deal, and I negotiated that deal with the water agency manager from another agency up in the Palmdale area, their original offer to us was this 1,700 acre feet of water for 5 years. And I said, well, that just really doesn't do us any good. We need at least 20-year water supply, because that, in California, that's the law. Before you can build new development, you have to demonstrate a 20-year water supply. It can't be a paper water supply. It's got to be an actual water supply. And so we held out for a 20-year supply, and we eventually got that. And our intent was to impose a fee on new development that would help pay for that water. We have actually adopted that fee, but we have not implemented it yet, and may not be able to implement it. And the reason for that is because, again, we get no say in the development process, right? A developer can build new homes or businesses or warehouses or whatever. He doesn't have to come to the San Antonio Pass Water Agency. He goes to the city of Beaumont, and he goes to the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District. So we have no say. We can't make him pay a fee because we have no say in that, right? So what our act, the San Antonio Pass Water Agency Act, that passed by the legislature, what that says is we either have to work with the city of Beaumont or the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District to enable us to collect that fee. In other words, as part of your approval process or the approval process of the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District, you could say, well, before we'll issue you your building permit, or in the case of the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District, your will serve letter, you need to pay the San Antonio Pass Water Agency a certain amount of money for the water for your development. And so far, we haven't gotten anybody willing to sign that agreement with us. So what we're probably going to have to do is raise our water rates. I mean, the region needs new water supplies. This is kind of my bottom line message for you today. The region needs new water supplies. Some of them are going to come from inside the region. Kyle mentioned your wastewater treatment plant, your recycled water system. You're going to develop, a new water supply source for use internally within our region. That's going to take a few more years. It's not a panacea, but it's great, okay? But there's going to be a lot more growth than can be covered just by the recycled water that's coming out of the plant. So we're going to have to bring more water supplies from outside this area, and that's what my agency's job is. That's going to be our job, okay? So we're going to have to go buy those supplies. Those supplies are going to cost more money. We're going to need more money to do that. And my board right now is struggling with who pays for that. Two choices: the people that live here today or the people that will move here in the future. There's no other real choices. Those are the two choices, right? The people who are here or the people who are going to be here. The people who are here today, the method for doing that is you add it to your water rate, because who's paying the water rate? In the end, it's the people that live here today. You make it a development fee, and you're making developers pay for it, which ends up getting put in the cost of the house, and so the people that move here in the future end up getting paid. One way or another, we have to do that. So again, we have not had a lot of cooperation from local governments in helping us to collect that fee. I've had a lot of opposition to that fee, and yet everybody wants more water. Everybody wants more water. There's huge pressure on my agency to bring in new water supplies to this region. I get phone calls. My board members get phone calls. We need new water. My board goes out and gets water. Oh, we don't want to pay for that. That's too expensive. Okay? This is the conundrum that we're in, ladies and gentlemen. There's not ever going to be a shortage of water in the state of California. There will always be water. What there will be is a shortage of cheap water. Every region in the state, and we're kind of the tip of the spear because we're sort of running out of water here in the Pass region, is going to be kind of a test case. Is this region collectively, and I'm not looking at the city of Beaumont in particular, I'm not looking at the residents of Beaumont in particular, I'm not looking at Banning or Calumet, I'm not looking at anybody in particular. Collectively as a region, are we willing, if we want to grow, are we willing to pay more money for water supplies? One way or another, either through higher water rates or higher development costs. Okay, and so far, as my board members have talked to other elected officials, not just from the city of Beaumont, but the other cities, the other water districts, so far the answer's been no. We're not. Okay? Again, we have made a commitment, a 20-year commitment for 1,700 acre-feet of water per year. We went out trying to find people to buy that water. We got no commitments from our retailers to buy that water. Well, it's too expensive. So we're going to have to just raise our rates. I mean, at that point in time, nobody has a choice, right? You want to buy water from us, you're going to have to pay the higher rate. So my board doesn't want to do that. My board's philosophy, and I cannot emphasize this strongly enough, my board's philosophy is to have growth pay for its fair share of new water supplies. As we get new water supplies, okay, as we, like this 1,700 acre-feet, it helps everybody. It helps the people that live here today because it helps make up for that difference. Remember, we had 17.3, now we're down to 11,000. So it makes the water supplies for the people that live here today more reliable. It does help the people that live here today. So it absolutely, philosophically, okay to add that to our water rates because it helps the people that are here today. No problem. But it doesn't, if you do it for the people that are here today, that doesn't do anything for development. Right? My board would much rather have sold that to new development and said, here's a 20-year water supply so they wouldn't have to raise rates. There were no takers. As I've mentioned at the beginning, we've been in negotiations for a number of water deals. We had an opportunity this past 8 months or so, an opportunity to purchase an extra 50,000 acre-feet of wet water. 50,000, that's a 3-year, 100% supply. It was wet water. It was all in one lump sum. It wasn't over a period of years. It was water that was available. Because last year was a really wet year. 2017 was a hugely wet year. There was all kinds of extra water floating around the state. Okay? You got two things you can do with that extra water. You can try to find somebody who will be willing to buy it and use it, or you let it flow out to the ocean. Those are the two choices. This particular water agency that we were dealing with was the city of Los Angeles, had way extra, and they had no place to put it. Their alternative, if they couldn't find somebody to buy that water, was to literally pour it out across the floor of the desert.
And what was the cost on that? I mean, were they willing to
Yeah, the cost of that water, so in our particular case, the cost would have been pretty high because they were going to sell the water to us, but then we don't have the infrastructure to import 50,000 acre-feet of water and store it locally. So I had to go make other deals with other water agencies who had groundwater banks to buy it and store it in those groundwater banks and then eventually bring it here over a period of a number of years. And when you add all those costs up, so just to give you an idea, so we sell water at the wholesale level to the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District for $317 per acre foot. If you work out that math, that's about 11 gallons for a penny. Okay? That's not 11 cents a gallon. It's 11 gallons for 1 penny. Okay, that's our wholesale water rate. This water that we were going to purchase delivered here in our area was going to be about $1,300 or $1,400 per acre. But it was wet water. It was water. And that we went around asking retail water agencies, no, that's just, sorry, it's too expensive for us. Developers, sorry, no. So we lost 50,000 acre feet of water. Okay. So we are currently negotiating, in various stages of negotiating, 3 or 4 additional water supply deals right now. Okay. We can get the water. I can deliver water. What I can't do is pay for it. My agency is not in the habit of giving away. Well, we're not in a position to give it away. Sorry. Right? So somebody is going to have to ante up, and I'm not preaching to you. I'm not saying it has to be. I'm saying somebody, the region, collectively. If we want to build houses, we have to buy collectively. We have to buy new water. That new water is going to be more expensive than $317 per acre foot. Somebody has to be willing to step up. Some group of elected officials, whether it's a water board or a city council or whatever, you know what, we'll pay it. Or charge developers for it. I mean, again, we would love to be able to do that. Right? So we don't want to gouge anybody. We don't want to, we're a government agency like you. We can't make a profit. What we're looking at is charging a fee per acre foot, and it wouldn't be per home, it would be per acre foot of a certain amount to be able to ensure a water supply. At least a 20-year water supply to get those homes built. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying really, really hard to do that. We need cooperation collectively from the region. I'm not preaching just to the city of Beaumont. I'm not saying anything is your fault or anybody's fault. I'm just saying collectively, the region needs to understand, elected officials and appointed officials, such as yourselves, need to understand that if we want to grow, and I think that's what this committee is all about. I think this committee is about growing. We have to pay the price. We have to build not just new water supplies, we got to build new streets, right? We got to build new bridges. Well, you have a nice, convenient funding mechanism for that. TUMP fees does a lot of that. Todd talked about the gas tax, which will pay for. I mean, you have nice, easy funding mechanisms for some of this infrastructure, but not for water. Okay? So we have to figure out a way to do that. My board has proposed this capacity fee. Again, haven't gotten anybody to say, yeah, we're willing to work with you to help you collect that yet. So if we consummate these deals, and we are relatively close, I think, to consummating at least 2 additional water supply deals in the short term and possibly as many as 4 in the next year, we can't sign on the dotted line to make those deals unless we have a funding source. I'm out there negotiating, and I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. Because that's what my board has told me to do. Jeff, we need more water. Go find new water. And so I'm finding it. We're negotiating costs. Somebody's got to pay. It's simple as that. So I guess that's my message to you, is we're working. There's not going to be a shortage of water. We can get all the water you want to get. For you, for the city of Banning, Banning's doing two big developments, right? The Pardee development, the Rancho San Gorgonio. Calamesa's going gangbusters, Mesa Verde, and what's the other one Mike's doing? I mean, there's developments all over the place. Right? They all are going to need water.
Jeff, how far does your service territory go out? So I know it's called the San Gorgonio Pass, but I think it goes beyond what we consider the pass, right?
It goes, well, some people consider the pass like to include Yucaipa, but we're only in Riverside County, so we go from Calamasa out to Cabazon. Okay, so everything from, so we have 3 incorporated cities, obviously Calamasa, Beaumont, and Banning, and then we have the unincorporated areas of Cherry Valley. I don't think they're going to be building too many houses over the next few years. And Cabazon, I don't think that they're in the near term going to be building houses. High Valley's Water District going to be hills south of Banning. There is a guy that wants to build a bunch of homes up there. I don't know if they're going to build. So it's primarily the cities that we're going to that more than the county, at least in the near term.
And what have you proposed to the different cities? I mean, my initial thought would be, okay, let's have the residents, current residents, maybe pay, say, 25%, and the new bills pay the 75. Have you presented anything like that that would be a reasonable compromise?
Sure, and I think that's exactly where we're gonna end up. And that does make sense, because again,
It does.
getting new water supplies does help the people that live here today.
Exactly.
And I have proposed that for about 4, 5, 6 years to my board, that it's gonna be, not whether that percentage is 25 or
Yeah.
75 or
Yeah.
20, whatever it is, it's going to be a mixture, right? We're going to have to raise our water rates to help pay for some source of revenue to pay for some of the new
inevitable.
water supplies, but we're also gonna have some kind of a development fee. So it's gonna be some combination of the two. One of the complicating factors on development fee, I'm getting a little bit into inside baseball here, but I think that you'll be able to understand this. The original intent of that fee was collect a bunch of fee up front from a developer, so before he builds his houses, he writes us a big check, so we have a big check. And then we go out and take that big check and buy, somebody's got some water rights out there, and we write them a big check for water rights, long-term permanent water rights. And we write the one big check up front, and we've got a permanent water supply forever. Okay. And when we conceived the idea of the capacity fee about 8 or 10 years ago, there were a lot of those deals out there where there were permanent water rights available for sale. Guess what? Other water districts around the state bought all those up. Desert Water Agency in Palm Springs, the Coachella Valley Water District in Palm Springs, the Mojave Water Agency up in the high desert bought all those water rights that were available. So now, that's not available anymore. This deal that I just told you about that we made last year for the 1,700 acre feet a year for 20 years, that, they didn't want one upfront check. They want a check every year, $1.2 million every year, right? So one upfront check from a developer, you have to figure out how much money do you need up front to make 20 years of payments of $1.2 million, right? So you can do that. It's just less, it's not as conducive. So you get all that money up front, then obviously you have to put some of it aside because you're taking some of it out every year. So the deals that are out there, the other deals that we're negotiating right now are also not one lump sum deals. They're annual payment types of deals. So they do lend themselves, they don't lend themselves quite as well to this one lump sum upfront payment of capacity fee, but we can still find a way to do that. You get the big upfront fee, you put most of it aside, you pull a little bit of it out every year to make your annual payment. You can still do that. You can't do that forever. You can do that, that's one of the things in calculating the fee, and we're in the process of recalculating what that should be right now. What do you make that developer pay? Do you make him pay for a 20-year water supply? Do you make him pay for a 30-year or a 50-year or whatever? Because that's very important, because you can't ask him to pay in perpetuity, because that would be an infinite dollars, right? So at some level, our board has to figure out what is it fair for a developer to pay. Let's just say, as an example, and I'm not saying this is what we do, let's say we make the developer pay for a 20-year water supply, and we make annual payments for 20 years, and that's all coming out of what that developer paid. So after 20 years, that developer's money is gone, but we still have to, those houses are still gonna be here 20 years from now, we've gotta do something. So the thinking is at that point in time, 20 years from now, those residents, they will have lived there for 20 years, they're not new residents anymore, they're existing. So at some point in time, you make a rate change to be able to help accommodate those continuing payments that go on, but the people have already lived here for a while, so you've given them. So it's gonna have to be some, like you said, exactly like you said, a combination. You can't do just one, you can't do the other. And it makes sense philosophically to do both, because again, you're benefiting everybody. You're benefiting the new development, you're benefiting the people that live here today. And so that's what my board's struggling with, is the fairness issue. Is how much of this, each new water supply we get, how much of it should be paid for by people that live here today versus how much people that will live here in the future. And they spend a lot of time, I will tell you, a lot of time discussing that issue. Okay, the fairness issue is very, very important.
What is the feedback you've been getting from that proposal?
The feedback, everybody's fine with what we're doing until it comes time to write a check. Oh yeah, that's great, sounds great. Raise your rates. And in fact, retail water agencies, and so obviously not picking on Beaumont because you're not a retail water agent, when we bought that 1,700 acre feet, we tried to get them to work with us to have developers pay for that. And they said, no, we don't want to do this, just add it to your water rate. So we're going to start, I'm going to my board next week actually and asking to hire a consultant to look at a nexus study to raise our water rate. We're going to have a workshop probably in February to invite the whole public to come and give us your input. And one of the things I'm going to say in that workshop is, guess what? We need new water supplies. We've got to pay for it somehow. Somebody's got to pay.
So when they ask, where does the surplus go that we're already paying, how do you answer it? You're paying for 17,000, you're only getting 11,000. So where does that surplus tax go that they're paying for?
Well, so that's a good question. So the 17,000, the money that's being paid for, it pays for two things. It pays for the water rights to that 17,300, which is basically free. The water is basically free. But the biggest, really, the money goes to pay to build and maintain the infrastructure. So the infrastructure is built for the 17.3, right? So we're paying for the infrastructure for the 17.3, and we need that infrastructure because again, we're going to go out and get additional supplies, and we're going to put it through there. So
And that's my second question was the same, was that actually is, so the fees that you're looking at to impose, does that include infrastructure, or are you okay on that?
right, you know, that's a really good question too. Right now, 95 to 100% of it will be for water supplies. We're trying to pay for infrastructure in other ways besides the water rate, and even the capacity fee. And if we can do it, we're going to do that. We have a fee that we adopted right now. Like I said, the capacity fee we adopted a couple of years ago, but nobody signed on to it. We realize that that number is way too low. The market has changed since then, so we need to raise it. So we're back in the process of raising it. The fee right now includes $170 per unit for infrastructure, and the rest of it is $3,000 or something is for water. And that $3,000 is going to have to go up considerably. It's going to go up considerably.
What's the benefit of coming to the different cities, asking them for help rather than just raising the rates to begin with?
So that's a good question. So what we've actually tried to do is we would really prefer to work with the water districts as opposed to the cities, just because we have a business relationship with those water districts, right? We sell them water. We work with them all the time. And if we were to go to this, in the case of Banning, it's the same. Banning is the city and the water purveyor for Banning. If we were to come to the city of Beaumont and try to negotiate directly with the city, and by the way, my board has had this discussion, whether we should try to do that. The Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District, who we have a working relationship, maybe sees that as a real kick in the teeth. You're just going around us and just doing an enemy. And we just try not to make enemies if we don't have to.
Gotcha.
It may come to that. And again, we've had that discussion at various times. I think I might have even had that discussion with Todd. I don't remember for sure. But it's possible that we may come to the city at some point in time, certainly at the staff level to begin with, and say, would you support us on this fee? We'd much rather work with the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District. They've shown they have a new general manager. He has shown on the surface some willingness to work with us. In essence, what he's saying, we'll work with you if you do it my way. And we're not sure that his way is the best way to get it done. So,
Jeff, I have a question. So obviously the taxpayers pay into the 17.3, right?
Correct.
Now that number doesn't change year to year. It's just the amount of debt service owed on the purchase and the infrastructure related to the 17,300.
Excellent question, and I can happy to get into that. So we get a bill from the California Department of Water Resources every year for our share of the debt service for the State Water Project. And it's mostly the same. It does vary by, let's say, $1 million, $1.5 million, but we pay on the average, it's about $20 million a year. So what we do, they're required by law, by our contract with them, to every year on July 1st, give us an estimate of what the next calendar year's bill is going to be. And the reason for that is because we have to set our tax rate by August so that we can tell the county so they can put print up the tax bills and whatnot. So the amount right now that we actually lowered it this past year. Our tax rate is 18.25 cents for every $100 in assessed valuation. So for a $300,000 house, that would be 18 times 3 is what, about $540 a year, something like that. So it was 18.5. We lowered it to 18.25. Yes. So it will vary over time. What the board wants to do is the board doesn't want to ever have to raise that. And those costs have gone up significantly because we had to build a brand new pipeline to be able to get that full 17,300 here. And we just did that construction over the last 10 years. In fact, we're going to have a dedication ceremony on that in February, and all your city council members will get an invitation to that. We hope that that's the highest it'll ever have to be, that we don't ever have to raise it. The board is very conscious of raising taxes. And so we've looked at, and I've actually spent a lot of time with my finance manager looking out to like 2036, 2037, out 20 years. And we think that we don't ever have to go above that rate. And it's over time, we think we'll be able to bring that down. So that's the peak that we'll ever be.
That's where my question was going. So as economic development, like if we succeed here as the city and we
Obviously,
bring
the
in,
tax base is going to increase.
the tax base is going to increase. So the question is either does the tax rate decrease to just simply cover the debt service, or is there a delta that you do something else with? And So that's kind of what we're thinking. So like Wolverine came in, that's $100 million in assessed value. That's a big chunk versus the 540 per house that they're paying into the same state water project. Now they're a new business, so we kind of look at it differently on, well, if you hit them with an impact fee and you put it in the rate, and we had that problem.
It's double whammy, yeah.
We've had that problem philosophically with impact fees for some of our developments, is if we have a rate and we have an impact fee, you get the bad guy when they come in the first time because they're new, but once they move into their house, well, now they're the same as everyone else in the same city. So now overnight they've become current, and then, well, now they're paying for it in the rate, and they paid the dollar amount up front.
Right.
So, and it's not the most politically savvy way to just increase rates, but in terms of fairness, if they build, they're now paying a rate equal to everyone else within the service area. But then you have to pass that on to the retail agencies, and like you said, they may not be too happy with you for doing that.
So again, our board, again, I cannot emphasize to you enough how much our board discusses the fairness issue. They really, really want to be fair and to the greatest extent possible make growth pay for growth. And so and I told you about these projections, we're looking at 20 years. We are, I and my financial manager are very, very conservative when it comes to financial projections, unlike some other public agencies in the past have been a little bit more, oh, well, we think we're going to get a lot more. Because we don't ever want to have to raise the tax a lot in 1 year and put it for. So we are assuming, Todd, when we, Kyle, sorry.
You can talk to Todd too.
We are assuming that there's not going to be a lot of development. But if there is, then yes, well, obviously we would look at bringing that tax rate down, because obviously the tax base comes up, and if you're still charging 18 1/4, the revenues from that tax base are going to go up. The costs of the fixed costs that we pay the state will go up a little bit, but they're not going to go up probably nearly as fast as our tax base is going to go up.
Yeah.
So I think there's a reasonably good chance that our board will be able to lower that tax rate over time, but we don't assume that. I don't ever go telling it people, we're probably going to lower your tax rate, because what happens if we go into another recession?
Yeah.
We went, the 4 or 5 year recession from 2008 to 2013 or 14, our tax base went down about 20%. We actually did raise our tax rate during that time, but not because of that. We raised the tax rate because we were building this $120 million additional pipeline to get all the water here. So we would have had to raise the tax rate probably even if there hadn't been a recession.
Question, Jeff. Have you got, on a local level, have you considered, for example, the D.R. Horton, KB Homes, Woodside up there, the CFDs got lowered by 50% about half a year ago or so. Now, have you considered taking that into consideration on a percentage rate? I mean, since they're at CFD, because I hear people all the time saying, I live in Fairway Canyon, I'm paying outrageous amounts of tax at CFDs, and these guys come in, buy their house, they're paying half. Are you considering taking that into consideration, developments like that?
I think it's tough to do that, to be honest with you, because the CFD doesn't give you any money for new water, right?
True.
I mean, so whether those houses are built within a CFD or not within a CFD, their water needs are going to be about the same.
Yeah.
So from our perspective, that model doesn't really work for us. And we get, our phone number is on your tax bill. If you get your tax bill and you look it up when it says San Antonio, our phone number's on there. So we get the angry phone calls from people, why am I paying this money? I get my money I get my water from Beaumont Cherry Valley Water. So why do I have to pay you on it? So we explain it to them. And so we get it. We get the anger, trust me, okay? Yeah. And, my standard response is this area would be a dust bowl if you weren't paying that, so.
That's just part of the fairness, it's a lot more work, you'd have to, do a lot more research, but I think that would be another fair way to approach that.
Right. So we actually have looked, and our act, I keep referring back to the San Antonio Pass Water Agency Act, does allow us to create what are called improvement districts, where you create an improvement district with certain boundaries that might have a different service area than others. For example, let's just say you put the area of Beaumont where houses already exist in one improvement district, and you put the area of Beaumont that's undeveloped in a separate improvement district, and you charge more for the water in that other improvement district, which ends up, okay, the problem with that is our attorneys tell us that those improvement districts and the different rates can only apply to infrastructure, not to water supply. That would be a great thing for us to do, I think, to help equal out what you're talking about, but apparently our act does not allow us to do that.
No, it doesn't allow, okay.
It's a legal loophole. And first question I always get when I bring that up is, we'll go to the legislature and have them change your act.
That's exactly.
The issue with that is, and I will tell you this, the problem with that is once you try to do that, then everybody else is out there that doesn't like us. Oh, as long as you're in that act, we want you to change this and this and this that helps those guys, not us. So we saw this a couple of years ago when the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District and the Ukaipa Valley Water District got together and presented a new bill to the legislature that would abolish our elected board. We're elected by the people, accountable to the people, to the taxpayers, and would have replaced it with a board that is appointed by 5 retail water agencies, not accountable to the people. And that went nowhere. Our state senator put the nix on that right away, but they tried to do that. They tried to take away the power from, and that's taxation without representation, because we set a tax rate on people, and you got a board that's not even elected by the people, right? But that's what these 2 retail water agencies tried to do to us. So I'm saying, if we try to change our act, you're gonna have other people out there that are gonna try to change it for their own selfish purposes. And then you just got a big battle on your hands. Then you're hiring lobbyists and all that kind of stuff. And then the public starts showing up. Why are you spending $10,000 a month on lobbyists? You get this in the city. I don't know if you get this in the city, but I mean, that's the two things that upset people the most: the public agency spending money on lobbyists and public relations. Why are you spending my money on that? So it just makes it, I mean, we get the fairness issue. We absolutely get it. We've kind of worked it every way that we can work it, and your suggestion is not a bad one. It just doesn't look, we've talked about it, it just doesn't seem to be something we can.
Jim, can you kind of walk us through strategically the process to determine how much water to purchase and when?
For a new development?
For the basins, for
So
the gas area.
what we're trying to do is so think of it as a graph. You have a graph. I think there's a graph up on the screen there, and it shows here's the water demands increasing every year, and there's a water supply. We want to keep the water supply graph above the water demand graph.
Absolutely.
If the water demand graph is above the water supply graph, well, we're in trouble, right? And actually, that kind of happened during the drought a couple of years, but what happened is fortunately, there's a lot of groundwater water stored in the groundwater basin. And so in those particular years, local retailers just withdrew from storage. And you can, just like with a bank account, you can do that for so long, and then you can't do it anymore because your bank account's empty, right? So, so we need to keep the supply curve above the demand curve. So we're out there right now trying to negotiate deals to get additional supplies this year. Again, we got the 1,700 starting last year. We're going to get that every year now for the next 19 years. I'm trying to do a number. We want water right away because we want to demonstrate. We don't want to be a hindrance to development. Right? We're not in the development business. Water agencies are not in the development business. We are not pro-growth, nor are we anti-growth. My philosophy has always been, and my board agrees with this philosophy, if new houses or warehouses get built, we want to make sure there's water to supply them. That's it. So we're responding to growth, but we can't respond. We have to respond proactively. You can't be reactive and wait till the growth happens. Oh, gosh, we got to go out and get this. So, and this is where it's important for the retail water agents, because they're the ones that issue the will serve letters. So before the house gets built, the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District has to issue a will serve letter saying, we have the water for this. Well, they can't do that unless they can get it from us. So we have to get it in advance. So that's why we're working really hard. The last thing my board wants, and again, we're not pro-growth, but we don't want the collective finger of the region to point to us and say, you're the reason we can't build houses. Collective finger, the finger, pick which finger you want, that we're going to get the finger pointed to us or another finger, you're preventing us from going. That's what we do not want. So strategically, we're out there, Todd, trying to get the water right now before the demand curve gets there.
And we're working on a general plan update. So we've got the water district as part of our stakeholders in that discussion.
Right.
So that includes in anticipation of build out, there'll be an EIR associated with it, which includes water acquisition, which will then provide information to you through the district with regard to what we project as our demand over time. So are you compiling that information from the other agencies that are then telling you based on where we are today, what we're projected to need through growth, what that demand growth is gonna look like. So
Right.
you've got a basin-wide curve.
Correct.
that
It's bigger than
is
just the
now,
city.
And that's generated from the local agencies up.
Correct. So there's a law in California called the Urban Water Management Planning Act. And so every 5 years, we as a water agency and the city of Banning and Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District and Yucaipa Valley Water District have to produce what's called an urban water management plan every 5 years, every years that end in a 5 and a 0. So we just did one in 2015. And that is a plan showing here's what we think the demands are going to be for the next, you actually need to go out 20 years. And here's how we're going to get those supplies. And what our urban water management plan in 2015 showed, and this is on our website, you can go look at it, is we know that we don't have enough water today to meet the demands 20 years from now. But we show we need to get this much water by this date and this much water by this date. And so that we're trying to meet that plan. Now, the thing about a plan, there's good things and there's bad things about a plan. The negative is that it's a plan. I mean, plans go awry, right? We did a plan before the recession, and the plan didn't come to fruition because nobody built houses for 5 years. And then sometimes it goes faster than that. So all it is a plan, but it shows that we know we need to have additional water supplies. And that plan, that urban water management plan that we produced in 2015, showed that we needed to get an additional about 2,000 acre feet of water per year by 2020. Well, we've already got 1,700 of it. So we're pretty well on the way for doing that, and so we just need to get a little bit more, and we got a couple years to get there. And then on top of that, by 2025, we need, I think it's another 4,000 more on top of that. So we know exactly when we need to get it. And again, the plan gets updated every 5 years, so in 2020, we'll do another one, and that'll probably show something slightly different. It'll go out 20 more years in the future. So we use that urban water management plan, and then all the input that goes into that, we take input from the retail water agencies, which is certainly going to take input from your general.
And then what'll help with that over time is as we do data through the water management plan that, for example, the district does, they're looking at what the per capita consumption is. And so as that may be changing, that can then change your long-term picture.
Absolutely.
You know, so.
That is, there's, and I always tell people there's no guarantees in the water business. If you want guarantees in your life, don't go into the water business in California. But the one thing the closest thing to a guarantee I can make is that the per capita water demand in California is going to go down. The houses that they're building now and 5 years from now and 10 years from now are going to have way less water usage per house than the ones that have been built in the past.
They will. The California.
And that's going to help us. That's going to help us.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because your growth curve, think of it as a curve, is going to start flattening out. It's not going to go up as steeply. It's going to go up a little bit fatter. Even though we're still building houses, each house is using a little bit less water than they were using in the
But what
past.
that means, though, on the rate side, is that rates are gonna go up, because you've got your captured cost, you've got your.
Fixed costs are still
fixed
there.
costs, they're still there, so although we're economizing on water consumption, doesn't mean rates or bills go down. They're still
That's the
gonna-
conundrum in California. As people conserve, their bills go up. And by the way, our wholesale water rate has not gone up since July of 2009. So we've gone, so we're getting ready to start the process here in 2018. So for 9 years, we've not had a rate increase. I participated in a poll of water agencies a couple years ago in the height of the drought. And water agencies all over California were asked, how many, have you raised rates as a result of the drought because you're selling less water, or are you planning to in the near future? And there was less than 10% of the water districts in the entire state had not raised or were not planning on raising rates, and we were in that 10%. So when we do raise rates, and I don't make guarantees, but I'm reasonably sure we're going to raise the rate in 2018. We know that we're going to take the heat. Absolutely, we're going to get the letters to the editor and everything else. You have to remember, it would have been almost 10 years since we last raised rates. So it's not like we're.
Reduced the tax rate.
And in that time, we have reduced the tax rate as well. So, and may reduce that in the future, although again, don't like to make those promises.
Interesting thing when Todd was talking about the per capita usage is if you were to establish an impact fee today, based on today's gallons per unit, and that's what they pay, and then 5 years from now they build the house and it's half of the consumption they would have paid for a 20-year water supply, double.
They get a 40-year.
Double what they actually
Use.
could have paid for or should have paid for. And then the other one we've thought about from this committee for businesses is if a business comes in and they pay for a 20-year water supply, there's no assurance that that business will actually last 20 years. A house will last 20 years.
Right.
The businesses may not last 2 years.
Right.
But they're paying, so that it all, and we've talked about this at nauseum at City Hall. And it always comes down to kind of water rates, even though they're not the fun thing to do, is, I mean, that to us, if the business goes out in 2 years, well, they paid their fair share for the 2 years they were in existence. Or do they get a refund if they paid for 20 and they lose out in 3? Do they get 17 years worth back or not? That's a fun discussion.
So a couple things to respond to that. First of all, per capita rates are going to go down. I don't think they're going to go down by half.
Yeah, it was just
I think they're going to go down by, because the indoor water use is going to be about the same. It's going to be the outdoor where it's going to go down. So it may go down 10, 15, maybe 20%, but it's not going to go down. Second thing on that is, that I wanted to say is, again, just the nature of the water industry has changed. All those permanent water rights that were for sale a few years ago, that's not what's available today. So one of the reasons, actually one of the main reasons why the retail water agencies, and I don't want to badmouth the retail water agencies, why they didn't want to use capacity or development fees to pay for this 1,700 acre feet for 20 years, is they really want to hold out for a permanent water supply. Why should we pay for a 20-year supply? We really want a permanent supply. And I get that. I mean, wouldn't you rather have a permanent?
Right.
Sure.
And what I'm trying, the education process that I'm trying to go through right now with people like yourselves and with the retail water agencies and their managers, and every manager thinks that he knows more than everybody else, is that that's not what's out there anymore. We had the opportunity 5, 6, 8 years ago to get those permanent water rights. It's just not there. We're going to have to settle for 20-year gobs of water. That's what we're going to have to do. And the retailers have not gotten that in their heads yet. That's the main reason why they have not supported us on our capacity. We don't want to charge developers for only 20 years of water because, in fairness to Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District, when they issue that will serve letter, what are they saying? They're saying they're going to serve water to that house forever. And if we can only tell them we can get 20 years, that doesn't solve they're on the hook for serving that forever. So I get why they've been opposed to the capacity fee for 20-year supplies, but my point is that's all that's out there. I would love to get permanent supplies too, but that ain't there. We have to look at the reality of what's here today. We can't take a look. We can't just hope for let's hope for something's not there.
Well, couldn't the residents from that community pick it up after the 20-year
You're
period?
gonna have to. It's gonna have to show up in the rates after. Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
It'll go directly with that community.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't think we can parcel out them all things like that.
It's tough.
I think you have to
It's
look
tough.
at it like and so the engine is the storage, it's the pipes, it's the pumps, it's all the things that take to deliver that supply. The water's like the gasoline. So that's the fuel that we need to fuel our community. And so like with your car, you know, hey, I'm gonna have to buy more fuel every year. I mean, you don't buy a gallon of fuel the first year you buy your car and it's always there. You have to continually replace it. And the cost of fuel is gonna adjust. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down based on whatever the conditions.
Water almost never goes down.
Right, but,
Not like gas.
Nothing goes
but I'm being positive. I'm a manager, but my crystal ball's not very good. So I'm not one of those water managers.
You should thank your lucky stars.
But the bottom line is there's a amount of cost that's going to go in. So water that was free before potentially isn't free anymore. You know, I'm going to go buy your well. I'm putting some of that well. That well's still there. We still got a portion of that water coming up, but our needs have grown. We've got to buy more and more and more to supplement that supply that is there. So, in looking at this and all these kinds of things, and presumably there may be a development impact fee associated with it. There may not be. But when you build your rate, will you build into it an additional amount that allows you to have a pot of reserve funds to go buy that spot water? We have
that right now. It's already built into our rate right now. It's a small amount. That amount that's built in for the spot water, I think we're going to have to increase that portion of it.
So when it will rain heavy again.
Yeah.
We know that.
That is a guarantee. We're going to have rainy years.
It will rain heavy. So the next year that LA has, 50,000 acre feet of one-time, 100%.
Yeah, wet water.
Water to buy. hopefully, we've got enough rate in place that allows you to go out and secure that.
Or, well, I would just say enough money, whether it comes from water rates or impact fees or whatever. Again, I think it's gonna end up being a combination of things, and we're gonna have to keep track of that. I mean, nobody's gonna be playing fast and loose with this stuff. We're gonna keep track of everything, but again, it helps everybody. New water helps, it helps make up for that difference between that 17,300 and the 1,100 and the 11,000, so the people that live here today benefit, but it's also gonna enable the construction of new houses. So both parties need to end up paying somehow, and again, my board is going to try, I think the great majority of the money that's going to be spent on water in the future is gonna be for new growth, as opposed to the people that live here today. The great majority is growth, but not 100% of it. So my board is really trying to focus on being as fair as possible and pass some of it on to the current ratepayers, but the great majority of it, obviously, we want eventually to be paid for by development, somehow.
But regardless of what your mechanism to capture that cost, ultimately, your product is being purchased by the local retailers, who then have to decide how they're gonna pass that cost on to our ratepayer.
That is correct.
So they could say, there's nothing to prevent them from saying, hey, we wanna establish an impact fee, because we have to pay you. So they have a contract to buy water from you, so they can build into their rate, they can build, so there's different layers and ways.
You're gonna have developers, though, really, we're paying for the same thing twice. We've already heard that, because Beaumont Cherry Valley does have an impact fee for new water supplies already, the developer's paying. Now, it's way too small. It's not nearly enough, so for all intents and purposes, I wouldn't say it's worthless, but it's not nearly enough. So, I think for both the retailer and the wholesaler to have an impact fee, developers are really gonna balk at that. So, we're gonna have to work that out, Todd.
Yeah.
You have to go together. But what I'm saying is there's different processes, there's different ways to do it, and it's gotta be a coordinated relationship throughout the layers. That are gonna come into play.
But again, there's only two sources, the people that live here today and the people that will move here in the future. It's gotta come from that pool of people. And the people that are here today, it's gonna come from a combination of water rates and taxes. And the people in the future, it's gonna come from a combination of the taxes that they're gonna pay in the future, and the rates that they're gonna pay in the future, and any impact fees that they pay. So, but collectively, the region has to get that in their head that we're going to have to pay more one way or another, whether we pay higher water rates or whether we pay more impact fees. In order to get the water to be the engine that Todd's talking about, you need more money. We collectively need more money. Thank you.
Very good presentation, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm happy to come back and talk to you anytime. If you want an update, call me back if you want to, whatever. Again, I apologize, it took us a couple months to get me here, but I think this is important for you and for the council to understand the issues that are going on here. I applaud very much what you're doing with your wastewater. That saves us. Every drop that you get from recycled water is one drop less we have to go out and pay more money for, right? Now, that water's not free either. You're paying a bunch of money to get that recycled water, but that's 100% reliable.
Yeah.
Right, that's not 60% reliable. You're gonna get every drop of that you need.
Well, remember, flush more.
That he paid
Say,
for
we
more.
don't stop flushing in a drought. We don't stop flushing in a drought, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you have additional questions, maybe, call me up. I get phone calls from the public all the time. Our phone number's on our website, sgpwa.com. Just call me up. I answer questions from people all the time, or invite me back, whatever.
Did you bring samples?
It was outside yesterday. You didn't get those? He pre-sent them. Yeah.
Coffee.
Drinking his product now.
Very, very
They
informative.
only sell in acre feet, so
Oh,
That's
it's a lot of water to bring in
water.
for a sample.
Think about the shipping cost.
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna move on now to 2D.
Thank you.
Discussion of the Economic Development Committee goals, which are listed there under 2D1. I don't know how you say that. 1 and 2. And so I just trying to recall, this was about what our purpose was as a committee, and then going back to how do we get direction from council to start to work on these. And I don't know if there's been additional discussion about that or not.
Not at our level. What happened at the last meeting is we were discussing if the committee wanted to come up with tasks and the like in terms of creating new ideas or things that they wanted to keep brought to, or they felt we could recommend to the council to work on, and staff was requested to put the actual vision statement and those goals in the agenda so that each of the members could review it at this meeting, prior to the meeting, or after the meeting, so that it's on there when we talk about this item. So that'll just continually be on this,
Okay.
moving forward. And then the tasks that were brought up for discussion at the last meeting are under the little Roman numeral I's, or the small I's, Q's, which is the attraction and retention program, if we wanted to talk about that. Partnering with the Chamber of Commerce to provide resources to businesses, and we've been talking about that a little bit at the staff level here at the City Hall. An intro to the new business program, and lastly, a summer internship program with either the Beaumont Unified School District and or Mount San Jacinto. And I know that at least Bertha had her colleagues email stuff over to me related to that program, and for the life of me, I could not find time to actually go through and make contact with them. So hopefully I'll have some time in the next month or so to make contact and figure out what that is. Ideally, I'd like to figure it out before summer, and that way we can hopefully put something together, or at least bring it to council and ask for them to say A-okay or not to that type of program.
So do we want to go over, starting with the task number one? What does that look like, or how would we help support that? Now, Randy, are you still on the chamber board?
Yes. And you all are invited to the installation dinner on the 25th.
Did they move the meetings? Weren't they at Tuckwit?
Yeah, they're at Techwood.
They're on the
Yeah,
first.
This is not Good Morning Beaumont. That's this Friday. You're all welcome to come to that one too. But that's for the installation dinner. We're honoring Kevin Bowers.
Oh, okay.
We do it every year.
What Friday is the meetings?
Second Friday, so it's this Friday for the month of
I
January.
went last Friday.
Oh, wrong one.
You're a little
Yeah.
bit early.
I showed up and my buddy said, "You're not going to have any fun in those clothes." 'Cause I didn't have on no golf. You know, I usually see him there, golf there. He said, "Oh, you're here for the wrong meeting."
So is this something that we would,
So it was brought up. Currently, the city has Todd and I working on business attraction and retention, but we do not have any formal program to speak of. We don't have something to like produce that's tangible that you could look at or read. We could tell you what we do and how it works and what successes we have and what things we could improve on. Ultimately, those types of programs are born at a strategic planning level, and that's something that the city council would need to start. And then once you have a whole economic development strategic plan that covers all the different programs that council would like to see performed within the city, this is typically one of those things. And in fact, attraction and retention are typically different programs under that plan. You normally have business retention and expansion, also known as BRE, as one program, and then you have business attraction as a separate thing. Not many times do the programs be combined because you're focusing your efforts on two different avenues. One is businesses that aren't here, and the other one are how to retain and grow businesses that are here, and not many times does that program mesh with the same exact tasks.
So how do we attract businesses currently?
Currently, we work with developers that have entitlements, and we find out what their shopping center looks like, what their entitlement is for a business park or a warehouse. And we work with them to identify businesses that are expanding within the state of California and the Inland Empire, and we see if they fit the needs of that shopping center. So a good example is if you have this 7-acre shopping center that we're working with right now. We have inlines and we have some pads. But
Where's that location?
that's by Highland Springs and First Street.
Oh,
So we won't go out and try to attract a super target because that development doesn't have 100,000 square feet of retail. So you don't focus on those, you focus on what's attainable for that area. And a lot of times the developers, if they're good, have already started making contact with those businesses. So we reach out, and if they need assistance lining up businesses, we go ahead and make contact from the city's perspective. We also meet with the businesses that they're thinking of bringing in to make sure that they're happy with us and explain the process when they apply, how they get to the finish line, which is selling widgets or foodstuffs or performing whatever service they're going to be within that suite. So it's very cooperative with the private community because they're the ones putting up the money. They're the ones getting bank loans to actually construct the buildings. And they're the ones that sign the leases with the individual tenants because we don't have property, we don't have buildings, and so we're not getting in that type of discussion. So that's really our attraction program. Same thing with the larger buildings, is we have entitlements, like what I spoke of. We have a property that has capability of having a 1.8 million square foot warehouse. So if we know businesses that are looking for that, we go out and we make contact with them. We give them a call. We also have the developer make contact with them. But the years, and Rob can probably speak to this because you've been doing this a lot longer than I, but the years of cold calling businesses and just saying, hey, look, Beaumont's a great place to come, are kind of over because they have so much information at their fingertips on their computer or iPad that they know more about our city than probably 90% of our residents do. And they have statistical information on how many cars drive on that street a day, what the income levels are of every resident within the city, what the daytime population is, what the nighttime population is, what the weekend population is, and all that gets thrown in some sort of algorithm, and it pops out a little red check mark or a green check mark or a red X on whether they need that business to enter the market currently. So that's why we don't have a cold call attraction program where we're just calling Trader Joe's every month saying, well, have you heard of Beaumont? It's a really good place. You should open up. I don't know if that worked in the past, but it doesn't work that successfully at this point in time.
It depends on the sector too, because what you're doing for a retail attraction strategy, growth strategy is a lot different than, the big industrial type users as well. And then manufacturing is different as well. So and he's right, it has changed a lot because a lot of times site selection is done from a computer well before it ever gets to your city or doesn't get to your city. And all the site selection firms, because now a little site selection firm is just as powerful as the big one because they have access to the same data. And so they already know, they have their matrix already set up in their software systems that they've set up. And so they just plug in some of those key variables and they already know where a good spot is for logistics, where a good area for manufacturing is. They have sometimes incentives built in, tax rates, all those types of things, that they factor into their equation. So yeah, this has made it a much different process than it used to be 20 years ago.
And I'll tell you, the public perception though is, hey, are you going in and you're asking so-and-so to come down here? Oh, we really need this. Have you gone in and looked, for blah, blah, blah. So there's still that perception of the old-fashioned cold call.
Yeah.
Well, and for example, with retail, that can make a difference because if you're going to, for example, ICSC, you're going to try to make a case for an Applebee's versus a Chili's or vice versa, or whatever the user is, for example, because your community is probably calling you saying, I really want this user on this corner. And sometimes the developer does that as part of their leasing program through their shopping center. And sometimes, pounding the pavement still works in that regard as far as retail users, because there's so many different developments that, you can have 5 of one in a city versus, an e-commerce facility, you're gonna have one in the region, and it's a little bit, it's a different animal. It's a different animal. So that can still work as long as, the particular organization is realistic about what they're going after.
And Kyle has relationships with various key landowners in key locations, whether it be retail or industrial. And as things crop up, and this committee even identified, uses that there have been phone calls made and research done into whether we can recruit, prospects to some of those places. So there is a proactive effort that goes to it. I think really from a city perspective, the proactive thing we can do is to create the opportunity for that infrastructure. And we had this discussion about water today, and, we're at a prime location. We can go in and try to pursue and keep abreast of what major industrial manufacturers may be out there, but do we really want that? I mean, they're gonna require a lot of water. They're gonna require a lot of other infrastructure. And do we want it, number one? And if we do want it, can we really sustain it? Realistically, service-wise. So, so to be successful, we want it to be sustainable for a period of time. And that's one element to the general plan that I'm kind of excited about with the update is, once we identify the pattern we want for our land use, there's an economic analysis that's going to determine whether it's really achievable for us. Is it sustainable for us? Will there be enough market? Will there be enough demand with those areas really that we're looking at? And so, so that'll be another element. But as much as determining what we want, I think, is what we don't want. And we're a prime market for logistics centers, right? And there's a lot of discussion in the community about whether logistics centers are good for a community and whether that's what the market's driving right now. So, is that something we want to pursue? Those types of things. And then to be prepared, we need to talk about incentive packages. We want to contemplate what types of things we want to do for hotels, for other things that are particular areas that we want to be ready to be able to try to capture. If it's between us and a neighboring community, what's going to make us attractive over guys. So,
Another interesting to think about is, so when you have these different programs, and I said, well, a lot of cities or agencies have an attraction program, and then they have a business retention and expansion program. And so you have these programs that staff are supposed to go through and implement. Well, there's only a certain amount of hours in the day. So how do you decide how many hours should be spent on attraction and how many on retention? And obviously that comes down from the city manager and the council. But in the last 2 months or so, I went through this very interesting exercise at one of the conferences I was at, and they went around and they asked a couple cities what they're doing, what business they would really like to have within their city limits when they went home. And this was during the time of Amazon headquarters too. So both cities are okay. We want Amazon headquarters too. Like that's the number one business out there we want. We want that employees, we want that company in our city when we return on Monday. So the next question was, well, what's the likeliness of you actually attaining that goal? Like, well, 5%. Like 5% success rate, which is probably way high considering this was a smaller city, or I'm not going to name the cities. I know who they were because they were part of the case example. But so they're like optimistically 5% chance of landing Amazon headquarters. It was probably like half of 1%.
Right.
I mean, the difference. The cities that are fighting for Amazon, right? You're talking about big time cities, and their headquarters currently in Seattle, and every city. I mean, what if Beaumont? Well, there was a 10% chance we're going to get them. And then the next question was, well, how much time and effort was spent at City Hall trying to attract Amazon? And I know Rob's agency did it. We chose not to here. But you're talking about numerous hours from multiple employees putting together the sales pitch. And you saw some people sent them boxes, like huge Amazon boxes, which then they sent back. They hit return to sender on it. And then
Cactus.
Yeah, a cactus from Arizona. They sent them a cactus on, hey, this is why you should be in our city in Arizona. So countless hours were spent. So then they said, okay, that's great, you did that. Now, what is a business that will be in your city when you return? Like, think about your biggest business in your city, and who are they? So they said it. Well, what's the likeliness they're going to be in your city when you return on Monday? And the guy's like, well, 99%, unless the thing like blows up over the weekend, it's going to be there. So then the gentleman said, well, why do you spend 50 hours at City Hall in the last month worrying about Amazon, who's a 5% chance? How many hours did you spend on the business that you want to be there, that is going to be there on Monday? So it just showed that it's not that fun to talk about the business that you kept in the city because they're already there. But realistically, when you talk about hours spent, it's better spent on helping your existing businesses stay there and grow, which are contributing to your revenue now, versus trying to attract Amazon. And you still can try to attract them. It's just be realistic on the hours spent. So it's a very interesting exercise that I thought I would share with the committee on how things work and all of that stuff.
So
And I would add to that I can absolutely guarantee you that when they, not when, but if they decide to move out of your city, you will absolutely be having a conversation about it, because I've seen it happen time and time again when cities, and it's happened to the county too, when you can't keep track of everybody, but when you're not engaged and all of a sudden there's a newspaper article about ABC company leaving your city, everyone becomes very, very interested at that point, and that's too late. And that's going to happen no matter how much effort you put into it, because it's just part of natural business cycles and attrition, and they come and they go sometimes, but it's trying to nurture those relationships while they're here. Some are still going to go whether you like it or not,
Yeah.
for business reasons, not anything that's negative about the community. But yeah, if you're not engaged, then it exposes a liability. It is a liability.
So with that number one, attraction or retention, it doesn't sound like it's a lot that this committee can do at this point, right? Without clear direction.
I don't think so on
Yeah,
that one.
yeah.
Until, you want to chime in?
Well, one of the things that council's talked a bit about is, I think it's brought up in the last meeting here, but the discussion about small business assistance. And, I think one of the things we definitely can do is we can be a sounding board, and try to go out, talk to small business and, just see what's happening. What are the stressors, what are the things going on? Hey, I have a problem at City Hall, I can't get my permits. It could be that, it could be, hey, there's marketing issues, I've got, this emerging issue. There's a new business in town, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the corporate rental office kind of setup. So it's built towards the growth and entrepreneurial base, within Beaumont, this area. And there's an opportunity there to work with them to be able to develop programming, coordinate back with the chamber to say, hey, let's hold some seminars on how to develop capital. My business is successful in the first 5 years. What do I do now? What are the pitfalls of growing my business, and how do you do that in a structural way? I think, creating some programming there, and I know that's, from council, we're gonna get into council budget discussions here starting in February, I hope, right? That's gonna be a key element of discussion strategically, where we wanna go, but if you have 10 businesses hiring 60 people, that's 600 employees, versus landing that one prospect that may be bringing in 400 or 500. But if the economy turns down, you may lose half of those 10, but you still have 300 employees. So it's that sustainability factor. We need that balance. But, I think an immediate gap we have is, how do we help our small businesses? We want to invest in downtown. We want to look at 6th Street and look at our city center.
Right.
That's something we're evaluating right now. So we do that, we spend money to look at that, to come up with this plan, we begin to launch that plan, but the purpose of it is to try to create an attractive, appropriate little retail market on 6th Street to help that grow and thrive even more. So, putting the pavement down, and putting signs up and making those things happen is one aspect. But helping those businesses not take that next step would be the other piece to it. So I think local business, we're on the map for the big stuff. We get calls constantly for movie theaters and logistics centers, and those things are happening right now. CJ Foods happened because we had a landowner that had invested in those buildings that were out there. that, was ready to move. And we were in competition within this area. I'll tell you, you're looking at a gentleman over here, Kyle, did an amazing job on making that connection and working with them and helping them work through the maze of all the things that was needed to make a decision to land here in Beaumont. And so, Kyle's a big piece of it that's already there. And I think we've got other pieces with general plan and then developing the support for a local business, I think are the next right steps for us that'll help us with that balance. And I think kind of help achieve some of those initial targets that are out there.
And Todd, as you said that, I was just developing this, I don't want to call it a vision, but this thought in my head about this committee then, having assistance with identifying who those businesses are, and then having some training on what that looks like to go out and have those conversations and bring that back as information to how, the city better supports them or what the issues are. And so that's, like you said, city, bigger ticket. This is how do we get out there and then really be a part of a community that's supporting what's happening now to continue that.
I would say either, and actually I was thinking the same thing, either getting us a cross-section where we can have 3 to 5 businesses come and talk to us. And we can ask them, what were your experiences? What do you think are the strengths that you saw? What do we need to work on? So that we can get a good cross-section of either new businesses that started up here in the last 5 years, as well as businesses that have been here for 15, and why they stayed. If we can even do it at this, or like he said, we can actually break up and each kind of meet with a couple businesses on our own and bring that back. Because we have the manpower, we just need to be directed so that we can go and truly help and be able to impact.
I think you have more impact if you were to reach out to a couple businesses and just walk in the door.
Okay.
Say, hey, just look around and you may actually buy something. But they show you walk in, usually around your wife's birthday. It's probably a good time to do this. But just strike up a conversation, with the owner that's in the store. Just say, hey, how's it going? How long you been in Beaumont? What's been your experience? Tell them you're on the committee, and you'll probably get a lot of information.
And probably more than you'd get, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably.
You probably definitely won't get yelled at.
That's true.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I hope not, because otherwise that's going to be a little bit rough.
As a committee member and from real estate agent, you're not going to get blamed for anything.
Right.
So.
Well, don't say that, Kyle. Hold on.
That's true.
Back it up.
As long as you didn't sell them that building.
But I think that is something that we can definitely develop in terms of what that may look like. And I think that's pretty viable.
Right.
To be able to do that.
Especially for the smaller businesses, because of course the big bucks businesses, that's a whole nother breed that I think especially Kyle and the cities are better at, but we can be more boots on the ground for local small businesses that need to get started.
Well, and particularly with the challenge, I think this year was the first year where you saw the growth in retail sales for online shopping grow now at a faster pace than that for brick and mortar shopping.
Correct.
And so there's more and more stress on, what was, I don't know if it was a fortunate thing or unfortunate thing, was captioned as Main Street a couple years ago politically. So, what do we do for Main Street? How do we help our local entrepreneur? Because that is what keeps Beaumont special. And that's what makes it unique to come to 6th Street Marketplace versus the 2nd Street Marketplace. So we need them both. They're both important, but, they do different things for us and there's some different perspectives.
It'd be nice to have a defined downtown with a facelift. That way it'd be much easier to promote it.
And we'll have that because we're working on, I guess the last meeting will probably update you on the downtown visioning piece that we're working on, which is at this plaza, and then looks at the streetscape things. But that itself, and the general plan is identifying what the actual historical area or central business district for Beaumont actually is. And so, that's being defined.
Good.
So we'll be able to come back. And anecdotally, we look at it from Palm to 10, I guess, along 6th Street.
Yeah,
and then, 10 up to usually 7th or between 7th and 10th. It's It's been a matter of some debate since then.
Yeah.
How far to go?
Right,
Yeah, how much money you want to spend?
right. How big of an area do you want? Yeah.
So an action plan, and so should we look at something like having a list of these businesses brought back to us and then discussing what kind of questions we can pose so that we're all kind of on the same page and then kind of divvying up who's gonna take what and stuff? Does that sound like a good plan?
I think the questions are more important than the list of businesses, because there's only a finite
agree.
number of businesses anyway.
Well, but we don't wanna overdo ourselves too, we just want a plan.
I think if we have questions, that if people want to bring up some questions during the next month or so and send them over, we'll try to compile something and bring them back. And then if people want to take certain areas, then go for it, because I think it's all upon us to decide how many you actually want to go to.
Right.
If Councilmember Martinez goes to one that then Terrence goes to later, I don't think that's a problem. You just get a good snippet on, and in fact, that's probably good to happen, because now they actually seen 2 people versus none.
Although if they see all of us, they may think that there's something going on.
Our charm.
But wait, Jennifer just left. I don't want to talk about this again.
When city staff walks in.
Yeah. Girl, go.
And I see that as a real positive in terms of the committee work. So like when we
Right.
started kind of, charting out what that looks like, and we're actively involved in developing the plan on what we're gonna do next in terms of action.
Right.
And that, so when you look at the three tasks, I see it as like maybe one of the 3, this one being a session. So whether it's next time we come or the time after that,
Sure.
that's the work that we're gonna do, and out of that, we're gonna move forward and
Okay.
make that happen.
So I'd say, yeah, definitely send questions to Kyle to help compile for our next meeting. I think that's
I agree.
doable and it feels good. That's all I gotta say.
Right.
That is right.
So, Terrence, when is your wife's birthday?
Birthday, what's that?
Oh,
It's coming up.
oh, no.
That's on the record.
She's watching right now.
It's coming up.
Good answer.
Yes, we are.
So looking at number 2, intro to new business program.
Like I said, we didn't get too far into any of these, so I think to go over all of these within the next month or so will kind of spread us a little bit thin. So I think I'm excited about the discussion that happened on one and
yeah.
the questions, and hopefully going out there and meeting some of the businesses. So let's kind of focus on that, and then we'll circle back on this new business program as well as the internship thing we'll be working on either with the school district or the community college at the staff level. So we can figure that out. We'll provide reports back to the committee and council as if we make any headway on those.
Sounds great. Okay, that's good. Yeah, that does feel good.
Yes.
So let's move on to E, local hire preference and bidding process.
So that was requested to be on here because we've discussed it at least a little bit in terms of what we were looking to do. Todd and I discussed it at the staff level. We have a couple ideas about the local hire process that maybe we didn't think of during the last meeting when we were discussing it. So I don't know if you want to take it or if you want me to take it.
One of the issues that I heard about when I was coming here and first got here, and that was that Beaumont was considered a closed shop, meaning that if you were not local, you weren't getting any work. And so, I do worry about if we start to take that position here, we're kind of sliding back into that mode. Plus, on some of the things that we need from a local agency, a local city, some of those expertise may not be there, and so what do we do? Look at pricing and things like that. So, there's a lot of concerns I think I would have, in terms of trying to bring a program like that together. It's something we gotta be careful. I think we try to be careful on all the city business here moving forward, that we try to make sure that we're going to RFP, that we're getting competitive bidding. We advertise, here on our city website, we go out to other avenues to try to get as much advertising out there, and we're trying to cast as broad a net as we possibly can. I mean, in some instances, we brought in special consultants that aren't even in California, like our SEC consultant is out of, Alabama. And so there's some of these things we got to go far afield, for need and various other issues. So I just think there's some political ramifications to that also in terms of some of the hangover effects from what's happened in the city in the past.
We still have that, though, it's not a preference, but it's still, when you give them points assigned, you still have that area in there where they get extra bonus or something, or is that?
We have not been implemented to our RFP, to our scoring matrix.
Oh, we haven't.
The only thing we
I've
have
never
in
seen it,
scoring is
so-
familiarity with the city's
With
policies and with state policies, and federal if those apply. But it doesn't provide extra points in their score if they're a local business.
Did it ever? And we just didn't follow it? Or?
None that I've
Okay,
ever
so
worked
then
on.
I must be thinking about
Well, a lot of the things we probably weren't even bidding,
Oh.
that we're doing now.
Okay.
So.
That was kind of our worry, and we would hope that the local vendors or the local unions are out there when we're looking for a construction bid. So Potrero is a really good one. $14 million construction bid, right? We would hope that contractor, that general contractor, has received quotes from subs within this area. And what they do to put together a bid is they know the project, they know the plans and specs and everything, and they go out and they figure out what subs are going to cost. And if a sub from LA is cheaper than a sub here to do the same exact thing with the same quantities and workload, then that just means the LA firm is hungrier than the one local. So we know that these contractors are talking to subs across the whole gamut of Southern California, and that's the hard part. So I think the firm we went ahead and council awarded to was out of Orange County, but I don't know exactly who their subs are, but my guess is there's some from Riverside County or San Bernardino County in there, and that just going with the state law, which is lowest responsible bidder, is kind of where we as staff think that we should continue with, as opposed to, because the preference thing would be to possibly throw out the lowest responsible bidder and go with the second if they were within a certain percentage of the lowest, and then that gets us into a little bit of a political pressure that we're not necessarily sure we would feel comfortable going to council and asking them to do that, especially with historically what occurred in Beaumont for the last 20 years or so. If it was a different situation with a different history, we may be having a different discussion.
And I don't think that's solely with the city as well. We have some experience with that in the past, and one of the things that I did find out is what we can do, still following the laws, is we can solicit bids from local contractors. They just need to be CUPCA approved. And so once they're registered and we know they're paying prevailing wage, then that assists us to, when we have something come up, we can let them know this is coming up versus just not knowing at all. So that's something that we can strengthen, so that if there are unions or companies out there or contractors, we can assist them through that process in the district to be CUPCA certified. That way they're at least on the list when something comes up that they'll be notified. So that's at least a positive that I heard. That's something that we're willing to look at, but we do have to really be careful about how we do business in following a systematic process, because that will always kind of come back and get us in some trouble. So
That was our update. I don't know if there's any other discussion amongst the committee members on that item.
okay. So looking at topics for the future agenda, it looks like, unless there's a speaker or someone else coming in, looks like we have a pretty good topic under supporting our local businesses and reaching out under retention. Is that good enough, or are there other topics? that you guys like to add?
Good solid discussion on that.
Yeah.
Get ready for it.
Spend some time and get it done, huh? Okay. Now, we do have a new item here, G, committee member reports. So I know that's new. So how do you guys want to do that? Do you want to, I mean, someone may or may not have a report, but you want to go around?
We go around, and if people have something to report or action, go ahead and do so.
Okay, let's start with Mr. Harris. You seem so excited and ready to go.
Well, we're, as far as the chamber goes, we're moving forward, doing our installation dinner and continuing the Good Morning Beaumont. We'd be happy to help out with any partnership with the city to help, implement some retention and surveys and questions to local businesses. We can email blast out anything you want to our local businesses, a questionnaire to whoever wants to volunteer to maybe answer some questions on a survey or whatever, like we were talking about. We'd like to help out in any way we could.
Okay.
Well, the council appreciates that at the last council meeting, we brought up the fact of what we were doing, kind of our focus, that we'd be coming to council and kind of giving them some ideas of what our focus is and getting their feedback. So it was well appreciated. So council pretty much on board, and they're excited to be a part of what we're a part of. So we're pretty good support on that. So now that we have tasks at hand, we'll be later on reporting that back and telling them what we're doing and seeing if they have any input on that. But I think this is good. It's finally we're getting moving. That's what we had talked about earlier. Is finally getting something we can get our hands into. So I'm looking forward to that.
Happy New Year. That's all I got, sir.
That's great.
You too.
From the real estate forefront, things are definitely popping. Lots and lots of new both buyer and seller clients that are out there. And so that's always in a January, do you see kind of how your year is going to go? So that has been great. And again, like you said, it's nice to get a little bit of meat in this committee and be able to see a way forward to truly be able to help. Because I think that's where everybody's hearts are here.
Yeah.
But it's nice to actually see a way to contribute. Besides just as a sounding board.
From the school district perspective, last night we had a board meeting. We had a study session about future growth. And so the board provided direction for us to go ahead and start to negotiate acquiring property, which is actually Summerwind, so it's actually Summerwind, which is actually in the city of Calamasa. And so, so we're going to move forward with that process of trying to acquire the land. One of the things that's still kind of left is what does that site look like? What we are advocating for is a K-8 that will kind of ease up some tension on our two middle schools and then provide an elementary school for the Tournament Hills area, which is continuing to grow. Our facilities director, executive facilities director, I don't know if you met him, but his name is Mike Satley. He actually lives here. Phenomenal. And he really provided some overviews of what the growth looks like. So we're looking at Heartland area, which is now Olivewood.
Olivewood, yeah.
All right, I'll have to bring that back. I'm gonna get him with that. And then actually, there's still development happening in Fairway Canyon, and still more to come in the far future. And then in Calamasa going north, because the Beaumont Unified School District goes all the way up to, I believe, Singleton.
Oh, does it?
No, actually, it goes past that.
Is that right?
Up to just south of Lake Bobsby. So it's, I mean, there's a lot of future growth in the next 5 to 10 years, which is exciting and anxiety-ridden at the same time. And then the other update is, I don't know if you guys have driven off of Cougar Way and Starlight. So the elementary school is progressing. It is, you drive by and the steel is up, wood is up, and plan to anticipate opening that this August. So a lot going on. It's all good, just moving forward. And then last thing is, so we had about almost 4% growth from last year. So we're over 10,000 students now, 10,100 and so students. And so still projected growth for next year. So we're busting out at the seams, but trying to get moving on the development. It's just how do we pay for this is our big dilemma.
So with the apprenticeship stuff, I'm still working with Beaumont High School and Glenview. Those students will still be coming to the boot camp on the 31st. My colleagues that work closer with Riverside, they focus on Alvord School District and some of the other ones over there and reach out to all the students. Some of the high schools in Paris and Moreno Valley also, I have a contact that is in the shops there inside of I think, is it Valverde? What's the high school off the?
Yeah, Valverde, where they make the shirts and the hats,
Yeah.
and, yeah.
So, one of those other high schools, we go to the job fairs there and approach the students there. We got a lot of our guys are working down at Saboba right now, and hopefully through the boot camp, if there's any seniors that are gonna graduate this year, we'll be able to get contact with those guys, and then come summertime, hopefully get them into the program if that's the interest, so look forward to that.
Awesome.
I have nothing to report. I probably spoke way too much tonight.
You're excited,
What's your name
it's
again?
good.
I just wanted to add that, you know, the county is doing very well as far as the economy. Unemployment's at the lowest level we've seen in many, many years. We're just over 4%, and that doesn't apply in all areas, but generally speaking, the county's doing very, very well. As an institution, we, I think it's online, paying for things. We've got a lot of projects that are coming online countywide, and so our budget's going to be pretty tight. So we've got some challenges in those areas, but nonetheless, we will continue to plug away and leverage. And that would be another message I would say as we develop some of these programs. I worked with Kyle for many, many years, so he knows this, but there's a lot of resources that can help in some of these efforts related to attraction or retention or whatever the case may be that we can leverage that don't cost you anything. Will help achieve the end results and business growth, and whether it's workshops, seminars, partners, whatever the case may be. And I want to just emphasize to leverage those assets that are in this area where they can be brought to the area to help further the mission. Don't necessarily try to do it alone. County has resources, other organizations do as well.
Maybe you could make a little list of those resources and bring them next time.
Sure.
That'd be great.
That'd be great.
Remind me, Kyle.
Give us more ideas.
Put it in the minutes.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you.
In fact, we want to do more outreach like that on the county level.
That'd be great. Yeah.
So that people are, you know, aware of all these different programs.
Yeah, because then we could take which ones we'd like that would fit our community, and that'd work great. Yeah,
We've already talked
exactly.
about business seminars
It'd help
together and-
tremendously.
Okay, our next regular scheduled meeting is scheduled for February 14th, which is Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day. Oh, boy, he's
Yeah,
right.
change that, or else
Yeah.
Well, you already forgot your wife's birthday, so.
Or I don't know when it is, either
we'll be
one,
in trouble.
Make that for though.
at 4 PM, so we'll,
Be an easy way to have
Well-
expensive dinner.
Yeah, I know. So
My friend
let's.
actually pretty happy about that.
I mean, the 14th does represent the second Wednesday. What I'll go ahead and do is see if I'll send out an email and see if the 7th would be better, because the month starts on a Thursday.
I would suggest keeping the date and inviting our spouses.
There you go.
Wow.
Did we get anything?
True romantic.
I mean, I'm not saying anything, but no.
We
It
want
may
to.
not be the most romantic thing.
We can't dim the lights.
They'll
and
all
have
like be
nothing
sleeping
to
in
do.
a row.
Oh, Lee, a simple no would have been fine.
That's how much I care about you.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Just for the record, I was on board with it.
Just to clarify, so we all gonna come back with questions for the,
Either bring them or
come
send them
or
to me.
Email.
I already
Doesn't
emailed
matter.
you.
Good, yeah.
What?
Already emailed you.
Oh.
that
And
we
then-
would go out and talk to businesses about, or have, and we'll decide,
Oh.
do we go out, do they come here,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
Last month, I went to Kentucky. I tried to get Jim to fill in, but we were in Kentucky, bought my son a house out there. That's why I was unable to attend. But we were talking about bringing a couple business people here. And I had it lined up with Lynn Baldy, and it didn't happen. So would you guys like to the chamber to bring in a few business owners and to express their concerns?
I think so.
Maybe two, because we don't want to,
Just to kind of hear
yeah.
what's out there. I mean,
And that way, yeah, okay.
You want to focus for March, since we're not sure what February's doing?
I think what
Yeah, that's a bad day.
February is,
We'll
let's
do it for March, how's
see
that?
Yeah.
if
do
our
it for
calendars
March.
work on the 7th.
yeah.
And if not, then we'll identify whether, maybe I'll send out an email that says, are you gonna be able to attend the 7th?
Yeah.
Or if
Yeah.
not, can you attend the 14th? And then if we know we can't attend the 14th, due to making sure all of our marriages stay intact, we'll just go ahead and not have a quorum for that meeting.
7th works
I'm
for me.
committed.
7th, I know the 7th works for me.
Todd's on this.
I give up, whatever
Yeah,
y'all say.
I already got heat on it already, so 7th is good for me.
I already have 2 more
For
meetings
just
that it does not
yesterday
matter.
already.
Yeah.
Used up all my good ideas.
I'm glad you brought it up.
I'm going to dinner with
I'm
you.
glad you brought it up because I didn't even know, so I would have been in real trouble.
Well, it's only because I heard about it yesterday.
Go ahead.
Well, while you're taking your spouse out to dinner, you can ask them how they like Beaumont.
Yeah.
You know, it's a part of the
We ask him the
program.
same questions.
Yeah.
What attracted you to Kyle?
Yeah, I don't know if I want some of those answers.
Part of your own retention effort.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so with that being said, this adjourns our meeting at 6:03 PM. Thank you.